Hi, everyone. Welcome to Write, Learn and Earn. I have to ask you, have you ever had those times where you are so goal-driven that you just feel overwhelmed at the end of the time, a little bit overwhelmed, and maybe you feel that you're suffering from burnout? Burnout is actually a very real thing and it affects authors. And today I've got John with me, who is an author, he's a therapist, and he's going to chat to us about how to avoid burnout. So John, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time. Congratulations on your book launch, and I'm here that you've got another one coming through as well. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, why you decided to become an author, and then we can chat about your experience of burnout and how you can help our viewers.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks for having me. All right. Where to begin? So many things to say. Let me start with the background. So originally, I studied natural medicine, complementary therapies. From that point on, I slowly but surely moved over more into a counseling space. And that basically happened when I saw that, patients who had certain health conditions just would not respond as well to treatment up until when we started a conversation with them. And for that reason, I transitioned into systemic work, commonly known as systemic and family constellations. But I have a subspecialty in trauma work and specifically systemic medicine. Why become an author? I think that's, ask everybody why you become an author. I think writing, firstly, is something I always wanted to do. I just don't think that up until the last 2 or 3 years, I realized which form it could take. And it was about achieving a life dream and about putting a message out there, which I feel can help people.
So I have to ask you, you did mention to me some time ago that you pushed incredibly hard with the book. And so you felt that you were having burnout. Now, I've heard a lot of people mention burnout, and for the uninformed, sometimes that just sounds like an excuse to laze around doing nothing and moan about how depressed they are, but it actually is a very, very real condition, and it affects a lot of people. I've come across a lot of breadwinners that feel completely overwhelmed and how to take care of their family when they are in that space. So chat to us a little bit about what is burnout, what causes it, and how can people work through it, and maybe how can family members support someone who's got burnout?
Okay, it's a very complex question you asking me to answer all in one go. So I'm going to ask you to break down the questions. Let's start with burnout, what it is, what it isn't. That's a very interesting question. The reason why I'm saying that is because you really get 2 major types of burnout. First, you get a physical type of burnout, which is a real physical health concern. Typically, what would happen in a case like this, you have an individual who either is a high-performing individual by nature, a type A personality, or somebody just who really has too much on their plate. And what happens in the human body, in simple terms, is you have all the stress hormones at this level. And at one point in time, the body just cannot keep on producing that quantity of stress hormone. Basically, then what happens, the body actually stops producing the stress hormone. Now, stress hormone is very important. Stress hormone is a great motivator. Now, of course, speaking about adrenaline and cortisol. And they actually get us to do things, it has its place in the fight-flight response when we are in danger. But too much stress hormone being produced the whole time, which unfortunately really is what's happening in society now, is a problem. And then the body just cannot keep up with this anymore. And then you start experiencing very real physical symptoms, such as obviously chronic fatigue syndrome, allergies, a weakened immune system. Now, you also get the other side of burnout, is more of an emotional, mental, psychological component, where the person just actually feels mentally exhausted, which actually can be a symptom of physical burnout. But it's quite complex because on the one hand, you have burnout as this physical thing happening in the body, and typically they will have the mental symptoms. But now you can get somebody who can have mental stress burnout, but not necessarily, have it as a physical condition. And that's why I said it's really a broad question. Unfortunately, and this is very interesting, is that most holistic practitioners, like therapeutic aromatherapists, reflexologists, homeopaths, chiropractors, naturopaths, we actually believe in burnout as a physical condition. But many medical professionals still do not believe that this condition is real. Right. Now we finished with that. What's the next question?
Okay, so one of the things that we wanted to find out is if you are looking at, you're doing a self-analysis, and the challenge that I find in my home is that because I write part-time with the view of going full-time, I'm working incredibly long hours. I'll get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'll write from 3 and I'll write until 7. And it's really the only space that I've got where I don't have people coming and asking me things, having my husband ask me for something, or my kids say, "Mommy, I'm hungry," or, they want a snack or that kind of thing. So it's a nice, safe space for me to write in. But with people that are writing part-time, who've got to carve out that extra time, that puts a lot of physical strain on them. When do they recognize? What are the symptoms that will tell them, I'm actually heading for burnout, I need to be able to take a break? Because most people will just motor on if they are unaware of what the symptoms are. What are those key symptoms that we can look out for in ourselves and then also in people that we care about?
All right. I think what we need to also understand is that burnout, in actual fact, is a reaction to a long-term stressor. So depending on the stressor, you're going to have different reactions. But a very typical reaction, which anybody, irrespective of career choice, could look at, is in actual fact not wanting to work on that goal or on that career or on that activity anymore. I mean, I know of so many authors, I almost reached a point of burnout personally. And I know of so many authors who, after burnout, they actually really struggle to touch their work. But the same applies to any other career. Symptoms can vary, if we can call it symptoms or responses, ranging anything from fatigue, depression, despondency, not being motivated, actually having low energy levels, having a weakened immune system. So it can range from very simple to very complex. And that's what makes it such an interesting condition. With burnout, what we need to understand is that there really isn't cut and dried. The individual, in my opinion, depending how in touch they are with themselves, will be the best barometer of that and will be able to tell you. But typically, depression-like symptoms is what I would commonly say would be a good starting point. I mean, with me, when I recently almost hit burnout, I was fortunate in the sense I still enjoyed the writing. It wasn't with me as much the writing which burned me out as what was going on in my life at that time also. And I know with me, I started developing an aversion to just having people in my space. So yeah, so it's a very interesting topic we're discussing today.
Okay, so let's say the person has realized I do have burnout. I still want to reach my goals, achieve my goals, but I need to take corrective action now so that this doesn't become incredibly debilitating on a long-term basis. What kinds of steps can people take?
Well, I think we're speaking about burnout in terms of a physical thing and a mental condition. And I think with any condition, whether it be physical or mental, I think it really is step one is recognizing that there's a problem and then making a plan to address the problem. This is not an issue or a health concern I actually recommend people try to address all on their own without a support. Because often this happens because the person did not have a support system, or there's somebody like me who's fiercely independent, very goal-orientated, and in actual fact, I don't want a support system. But once again, I'm getting one or two different things. So step one, I would say recognition. Step two is get your support system in place. And there's so many different things out there which you can try, which is really wonderful. What personally worked for me, number one, was recognition, which was difficult because of the kind of person I am. And then I've been working with a life coach since I've started the whole writing career to keep me more focused and goal-orientated, which I think in a way actually contributed to the burnout, because we were pushing to get me more and more and more productive, really to get me at that peak performance level. But then while I was at that peak performance level, this whole COVID-19 thing happened, and I so happened to be a registered medic, and I had to do all of this training with PPE and COVID-19 and the World Health Organization. And I think that ties to the third point, which I'll make, is you need to learn to manage your energy levels, because that's the biggest mistake I made. I just kept adding fuel onto the fire. I recognized there was a problem. Being a therapist myself, we kind of always think, this can't happen to us. I was really surprised that I developed this problem. Where it comes from, I then did the support system in place, which was going back to my coach. In actual fact, my spouse recommended and said, listen, you need to go back to your coach. Oh, why? And he said, I don't know what this man does, but whenever you come back from him, you're a lot more straightened out. And the session mainly, which we did, yeah, you must know if your spouse sends you to the coach, eh? And you are the therapist who can do coaching. That's interesting. I think so. And then what happened, I sat down with my coach again. I said, listen, this is not working. I'm crashing. And we started doing small things, putting small things into place. For example, one of the things we said is that I will from now on start working normal working hours. My first question to my coach was, what's normal working hours? Is 9 hours a day. People work 9 hours a day. I will feel so guilty doing that. Especially, I think, because my relationship is also of that nature that we both high achievers. And there is a bit of a power play, of course. When you've got two very career-driven people, whether you're competing or not competing, you are competing. I think that brings me to the other point, where I would say, "Ah, I heard this wisdom, but I didn't internalize it. But I only realize what they say now is that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon." I think every author has heard that. And really what it is. And I think that is the same for each and every goal. But what was interesting for me, and I'll actually mention this at point 5, is why did I drive myself? Or why would any individual want to drive themselves so much? Now, for those of you who know me, know I have the background with the abusive stepfather and the alcoholic father and all of those classic things. And growing up, when your father's abandoned you and your stepfather's not nice to you, yes, you do start getting this feeling of this lack of self-worth. And my stepfather always used to say, "Oh, you're stupid, you never achieve anything in life." And yeah, I was pushing and pushing and pushing, knowing that I can do this and I can achieve even more. And so, yes, as a part of point 5, I then came to realize that I pushed myself to burnout because I had something to prove. But now, I think also I was fortunate in a way that I could take a 2-year sabbatical almost, actually, to focus on writing. And in that time, the amount of stuff which any author has to learn, I mean, you can, tell me, you agree with me on this, Kim, is that you're the writer, you're the publishing house, and you're the promoter. And it's just a lot for me, even who had the opportunity to do it full time. I pushed myself to burnout doing that. Now, coming back to your question about a part-time author who still has a day job, I think the most important thing that, yes, it comes back to that thing of it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's rather have clear, actionable, but small daily steps, so that you still feel you achieving something. Because I can only imagine that for a writer like yourself, having a husband and children and business on the side, that it must be very, very challenging. Before I started writing, I don't even think I realized how hard writers work. Now I think I've seen how hard they work.
And I think that another thing is choosing the people that you spend time with. And I say this with the greatest of respect, because I've had to let go of some relationships when I became an author. Because when you speak to established authors who are your self-published authors, they always say the same thing: do not judge your results for a minimum of 1 to 5 years, preferably 5 years. Now, on a business plan, when you go through to any company, they want to look at what your 5-year plan is, because a traditional business is expected to run a loss at least in its first year. But somehow people think that being an author is different. So when you release that first book, they're like, how many books have you sold? Are you able to quit your day job yet? And then when you can't produce those kinds of results, then they think that you're a failure. So I've had so many people ask me absolutely irrelevant questions because they just simply don't understand the industry. And I've had to step away from those people to say, these people, although I care about them and I know that they care about me, their opinion is not relevant in this journey. So I then had to form a new tribe, a group of people that understood me, understood what the journey was that I had to go through, and could be encouraging along the way. My editor is probably the best person for this, because she's always wagging the finger in my face, like, Kim, the hours. Like,
always the editor. Always. Listen to your editor. That,
Yeah.
in actual fact, is another way to prevent burnout, in actual fact. You know, something I'm thinking now of mentioning is that listen to your editor. They're actually a great resource to help you prevent burnout. Relationships, yes, I experienced the exact same thing. It was interesting for me, also as a part of working with this specific coach. I started this writing journey because I felt overwhelmed with the idea of writing and where to begin and what to do. And then when I actually met guys like you, and you know, I was overwhelmed, so I did the support structure. Even in work support, I burned out. If you look at it that way. Um, and I remember as part of the coaching process for myself, there was an exercise we had to do, and my friends are obviously going to be listening to this very possibly, so shoot me if you want to, guys. But you've brought up such a valid point, because I started evaluating my friendships, yes, and I realized that I wasn't getting what I needed from my friendships. And you know, that was even before I knew any other authors. Only like recently I've become part of the indie community. I've been meeting these wonderful people. And I had to, in some ways, distance myself from some of my friends for a while. Not because I did anything wrong, but it was also a part of managing myself, you know, mentally and emotionally. And I then went through a phase exactly like that, where I thought, oh, I'm going to have to leave these relationships behind because they're not serving my growth as an author. I think especially for genre I write in particularly, you know, our self-growth to us is very important. I think for any writer in general. And I think I took a different approach to my relationships, where I started looking into and saying, right, this person in this friendship, I'm getting this from. Just a light-hearted person. When I'm down and tired, I'm going to spend time with this person. This person I can't speak to about the serious stuff, like, yo, I got stuck, you know, on this in the manuscript, I'm writing about this, what do you feel? So this person, you know, I could have a serious discussions with. So yes, I think you brought up such a valid point with relationships that, and I think the personal relationships aren't in order, you're in for a very challenging time. Because people don't understand how much energy goes into this.
I find that now I didn't experience this with my first book because I just didn't know what the hell I was doing. But when I got into the marketing space,
Join the club, I mean.
when I got into the marketing space, I started, there were a whole bunch of extra dynamics that came into it. So I sell primarily in the States. That's my biggest market. So if I go into social media and I want to promote the book, I actually need to be available at the time that they are available. Because if I post my post at a time that they are asleep, by the time they get up and they get onto Facebook or Instagram, they're not going to see me. So when I launched the second book, and I didn't do any advertising, so I had to look at my figures, and I did advertising with the first book, but I didn't do advertising with the second book. With the second book, I actually made more money. The difference is that I moved my time slots around so that I was promoting, I was active at the time that my readers were available. And that caused a huge reaction in my body. I could feel like pins and needles going down my arms, you know, through most of the day. And I had to become incredibly strict on myself. I had to say, because I'm usually a person, if you're having a nap in the day, then you're freaking lazy. Like, don't come to me and say, oh, I took a nap in the day. I'm like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, I think they think all writers are lazy, especially South African writers. All we do is sleep all day.
So I had to say to myself, it's actually okay to, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, to go and have a lie down, because by the time 1 o'clock in the afternoon comes, I've been working from 3 o'clock in the morning. I've then had a 10-hour day. So if I need to nap then I'm not going to feel guilty. I'm going to say to myself, this is the amount of hours you put in. The rest of the South Africans might be working at that time, but you've actually been productive. So reevaluating like how I manage my time, how I work through things. And then the other thing that I found was very important is my daily rituals. So the average author lives off coffee. The first thing I do when I get up in the morning is I drink water to hydrate my brain. I'll have a boiled egg so that I can get protein in my body, because I also found that if I have too much sugar, like if I have a cereal with sugar in it, or I have coffee or whatever, I get that like feeling like there's like little tiny ants rushing through my body. And so eating the right stuff, and then I'll have an orange and I'll have spinach, because both of those have got folic in it, and that helps to protect your heart. So that's how I start my day. So by the time I start writing, I actually have sustainable energy and I feel better than if I just grabbed a muffin and a cup of coffee.
So let's speak about that for a moment, because yes, you've brought up a lot of very good, very valid points. And yes, so for us in the Southern Hemisphere, that's 100% correct. I mean, my optimal writing hours are from 10 o'clock at night till 3 in the morning, typically. My writing is like a 4 or 5 hour episode at a time. And what happens is we speak about the body's circadian rhythm, which basically is when you go to sleep and when you wake up. And there, generally speaking, is considered, well, there is what is considered to be a healthy circadian rhythm, which really is going to bed when it's dark and waking up when it's light. Because at night, darkness starts the process of helping the body, well, in actual fact, the pineal gland in the brain, to actually start, producing the melatonin, which puts you to sleep. And then in the morning, it starts producing the serotonin, which obviously we know is often very lacking in depressive patients, which is why you'll definitely find there's a link between stress, burnout, and depression, very similar. And now what happens is serotonin, wakes you up in the morning. Now what happens is if you have too much of the one or one of the other one, this leads to problems. And I mean, we all know lack of serotonin, tiredness, and depression is a symptom. So what I have found, and I found this from a viewpoint of not burning out, I've also found this from a creativity viewpoint. Find when I'm writing, even though I may not be doing the normal sleep cycle, the normal person out there is doing, that I find that sleeping is crucial to my creativity, even as a non-fiction author. So sleep, very important. Hydration, very important. Yes, we all live on coffee. Me too. I'm totally guilty. I think I'm more addicted to coffee than anything else, probably, nowadays. If the espresso machine spots, it's like John is off to the mall. I leave everything. But yes, that does put the dehydration. And studies have actually been done where they've actually seen that students who drink water throughout the night instead of coffee actually perform better on their tests. There's a wonderful book on it by an Indian doctor called You're Not Sick, You're Thirsty. And fascinating, where he ended up in prison in India, and obviously conditions are terrible in India. And these inmates found out he was a doctor and would ask him for help, and it didn't have anything to help him. So he started treating them with just water, and symptoms appeared miraculously. So don't underestimate the power of water. But now, water is a universal solvent, which brings me to the other point you made, which is about what are you eating? Yes, a low GI diet, which keeps your blood sugar stable, not doing this and then crashing, which would typically be your whole grain with a protein, like you said, which is perfect. With maybe an apple, not too much fruit. Fruit's good, but not too much. Otherwise, you spike the sugar again. That is really important. You also find that when you do follow a lower GI diet like that, overall, you will actually feel less stressed. And one of the reasons also being is that a low GI diet is very rich in a couple of things, specifically for us, which would be really great, would be the vitamin Bs, which you need for stress, the magnesium, which you need for stress. If you look at a typical Mediterranean diet or low GI diet, which is the one I typically would recommend, you have your healthy fats. And when we look at the brain is actually predominantly made of fats. So we need those healthy fats, the olive oils, all of that stuff, CMs. And then the other thing is exercise. We need the exercise because you were speaking about the heart. I'm actually glad you spoke about the heart because you brought folic acid in. And not a lot of people are actually that aware of how important folic acid really is. And exercise is so important for not just an author or for creativity, but so many other things. And I mean, one of the biggest benefits of exercise is that it helps the body burn up that excessive cortisol and testosterone that's floating around. Usually after a very traumatic incident, we often recommend, well, not we often, we do recommend this, is exercise to use up that excessive adrenaline, cortisol circulating in the body. And then, of course, meditation. Meditation for me was a huge help. It's not everyone's thing, but in that case, relaxation exercises are wonderful.
I participate in a group called the Uncovering Greatness team, and they've got a lot of free resources. But for a year, I actually participated in one of their programs through the Coca-Cola Bottling Company of South Africa, CCBSA. They had an entrepreneurship development program, which I participated in, and Uncovering Greatness managed that program, that year program. And they taught us this technique, which they call presence. And essentially, it's two people sitting in front of each other, looking at each other in the eyes, and just being present, being quiet, and they work you up from 1 minute to 5 minutes to 10 minutes and eventually 20 minutes, which apparently 20 minutes is like quite an optimal number when it comes to meditation or anything like that. And they don't call it meditation, but it has similar effects to meditation. So I know that when I was writing my first book, my father went into hospital and he was in Port Elizabeth, and I couldn't get to him at that stage. And I just went into overdrive. My mother was incredibly stressed out at the time. And so there were a lot of frustrations that were in our relationship that bubbled to the surface as a result of my father being in hospital. I actually felt like incapacitated. I couldn't function, and I knew that I needed to get stuff done. Now, fortunately, because I had been part of the Uncovering Greatness team, when I learned this technique, I taught it to my husband. And as soon as he saw that, like, I was derailing, he grabbed hold of me and he said, "Come sit down. We're doing presence now." And that just focused me, brought my attention to where it was supposed to be. So it didn't eliminate the tension that was around me. It just helped me to walk through it. So that I could get done what I needed to get done, and then also deal with what was happening around me. So those kinds of things, of meditation, and even if you're doing it in this way that I mentioned, it makes a significant difference with your ability to get through the day. And I also find with my husband and I, we plan to do it every day. We don't do it every day. We don't always sit down with the discipline of saying we're doing presence now. But I can tell you the things that happen in the day when we do it is vastly different to the energy levels that we've got when we don't do it. Things just seem to flow better. We are more focused. We're less snappy with each other, and we're able to achieve more when we've been able to do process, because presence, it allows us to connect with each other and manage our energies.
I think what you've mentioned is very, very, very important and very true. And in actual fact, if you go and look at the American Heart Association, they actually recommend transcendental meditation for heart health and for obviously the reduction of high blood pressure, hypertension. There's been so many studies done on it. But you've brought up something interesting, two things in particular. And number one, what's your hobby? I remember when I went to my coach and said, listen, I'm at the point of burning out. We need to do something. One of the questions was, what's your hobby? And I was, oh, I read. He's like, no, not reading anything else. I'm like, oh, well, okay. Well, I like to go to the gym and I like to box and things like that. And it's okay, no, that you can do. But yeah, what's your hobby? And I think something non-writing related is so important. And we get taught as authors that if you want to be an author, you have to do two things. You have to read a lot and write a lot. Now, I think we all have a love for reading, most authors, as far as I know, I would hope. But I do think, what's your hobby? You do need that time just away from the books, whether it's your book, whether it's, I mean, in my burnout phase, when I was reading for burnout, one of the first signs for me was the fact that I didn't want to read books anymore in my genre. And I'm not a fiction reader. And I started reading fiction, which was one of the rules my coach also put in place, where after work hours, I was not allowed to read books which would relate back to what I'm writing about or researching about. Because in my genre, I read a lot because I have to do a lot of research on things to stay current. But what you were speaking about is, that 5 minutes of just doing nothing. Now, when I was a student, my reflexology lecturer actually taught us, should have listened to her, every day you're actually supposed to just have half an hour where you do nothing. And I was actually, interestingly enough, watching Eat, Pray, Love last night, which obviously is based on the book from Elizabeth Gilbert. Whenever I'm not in the best space, I would end up watching the movie. Just been a different state of mind. And in actual fact, in the movie, I found it so interesting, where she's speaking to the Italians and they say, you Americans, you understand entertainment. Okay, my American friends, I'm not like, taking you guys out here because I have a lot of US-based friends. So let me just mention this just in case.
Disclaimer at the bottom.
Yeah, so disclaimer, right, guys? I'm using you, for example, but you know me well enough, so I'll get away with this. But when now in the movie, now she's having this discussion, Julia Roberts, obviously the main actress for the Italians, and they're saying, you guys should know entertainment, and you're really good at that, but you don't know pleasure. And she's like, but what do you mean? And they, well, you work and work and work and work, and then you have to see an ad to say, oh, you deserve a break, and then you take a break. An Italian, they see the ad and they're like, thank you. Yes, I know I deserve a break. And in Italy, I don't know if this is true, but I know that most authors research their books really well. And I'm assuming that the research in the book was done very well, where they actually do have a thing, they call it the art of doing nothing, and how she lost herself in her marriage and in her career, and interestingly enough, in her writing, and how through doing nothing, she discovered herself. But something else which was actually quite profound, and I'm thinking back in terms of burnout, is where in the end she's too scared of having a relationship because she can't maintain her balance between living the spiritual life and the normal day-to-day earth life. And her teacher says to her, you know what? Sometimes losing balance, sometimes falling in love. Now, how you say it? Sometimes losing balance because you are falling in love is a part of living a balanced life. This just brings me to the point where I do think that burnout is a natural part of life for me. And what's been really interesting for me is my life has gone to greater balance than ever before because of the burnout. I think also learn your lessons and apply them.
I tend to agree with you. Now, when I had my first child, I had very bad postnatal depression. In fact, I've had postnatal depression with all of the children, but the first one was very overwhelming. And it is similar, I think, to burnout because I was a single parent. There was a lot of stuff happening, and I actually got into a very dangerous headspace, a very dangerous headspace. So I reached out and I got help with that. There were people who specialized in postnatal depression, and there was something that asked me. They said, "When do you go to sleep?" So I said, "Well, flip, at the end of the day, I'm like so exhausted. I go to sleep when my child goes to sleep. We actually get into bed together and we go to sleep." And then like, "You're going to stop doing that right now. From tomorrow," they said, "I know you are so tired because being a single parent is really hard, but from tomorrow, once she is asleep, you're going to get up," because I said she won't go to sleep unless I'm with her. So they said, "Fine, go lie in the bed, let her go to sleep. But as soon as she's asleep, you're going to get up. And even if it's 10 minutes that you're going to watch something on TV or you're going to read a book or whatever, take that time for you." It made a significant difference in my emotional well-being at that time. And all of the suggestions that they made at that time were very small suggestions. So sometimes people think you've got to like do this massive overhaul and, I don't know, like quit your job and everything like it. But sometimes you can actually make big, significant changes in your outcome by doing small changes in your input.
That's exactly what I did with my coach, is that we didn't take big steps. We took small steps to restructure my life. But those small steps all added up to a huge or a massive restructuring and reintegration. And I mean, you don't want to go to a coach and as a burned out person, leave with 25 major action steps. I mean, that's not the point. So yes, I totally agree. And the other thing also is when we, in actual fact, just give me a second.
So Jean has just had a little bit of a distraction. So if you're going to want to have extra resources on information about how to deal with burnout, we're going to put a little bit of information at the bottom. And then I would also recommend that if you're really feeling overwhelmed, that you contact your healthcare professional, maybe go for counseling or something like that. But take this kind of thing very seriously, because it can have major consequences for yourself, your health, and your family. So, John, you were saying 25 steps you don't want to take?
Yeah, sorry, I'm back. Yes, that brings me now to point number 2, the support system, which is so important. And yes, it can really have, dire consequences in the long run for you. I mean, I personally recovered from post-traumatic stress disorder previously, not because of writing burnout. And in actual fact, it's different. The PTSD, I mean, here you now have backflashes and nightmares and some other things, and some physiological responses. But yes, in the long term, what we found really in the long term with burnout, stress burnout, is that eventually the adrenal function becomes so low in the body, and people don't really realize what the function of the adrenal gland is. The adrenal gland really isn't just there to produce stress hormones when you need it. The adrenal gland is so important for managing energy levels, for controlling allergies, for managing inflammation in the body, for cellular healing. You actually will, in extreme cases, you will experience slower wound healing. Important for water and mineral balance. So you get this with water. It's a natural antihistamine. It's got so many functions in the body, and you really don't want to burn that out. Because it's really difficult to actually come back from that. And when you really got to the point of adrenal burnout, really the best thing you can do is actually go on a sabbatical, meditate for a year, and actually avoid people, because you won't be able to cope with people. But something which is really great is vitamin B5 supplementation. It's wonderful for supporting the adrenal gland, and a supplement which I personally am very fond of is BioTrack, because it gives the body vitamin B in a very absorbable form. You're going to take a person who has adrenal stress burnout, and you're going to start pumping them vitamin B. That in its own right is a lot for the body. Cannot stress out already stressed. So yes, I agree. If people are really struggling with severe overwhelm, severe stress burnout, you can contact me. I am available for sessions, or I can put you in touch with different health professionals in your area, depending on who and what you may need. But yes, get help, get a support system in place. And as much as your family and your friends can be a support system, this is the one time I actually recommend you work with the professional.
I agree with that, because the people's expectations around you, your family's expectations, are very different to what you sometimes need to get well. I just want to ask John, so what we're going to do is, in the bottom, we're going to be able to put down some contact details for you, how they can get a hold of you.
Okay.
If they are not based in the same city as you, are you able to do consultations via Zoom?
Yes, I can do consultations via remote platforms. I am set up for that. That is correct, yes.
Okay, excellent.
And some people, obviously in the time of COVID-19, it's preferential to do sessions like this. But some of us do still see people in person. Obviously, keeping certain protocols and things in place. I'm obviously very strict because of my medical background also and my natural medicine training, where before somebody sees me, I want them to self-isolate for a certain period of time in person. But I mean, it's wonderful. We've got all these platforms nowadays. So yes, I will give my details. I think there's just a tip I want to leave, which is really wonderful. This helped me. It's a time management tip. Now, I'll be very honest. I do have ADD, which was brought on by different traumas. So sometimes my world can be a bit messy. Me and a friend were laughing. He also has ADD. He happens to be a technical writer. And he says he has like once a week, twice a week, he has like this like desk clearing session. I should take all the papers, off his desk and put them into his diary. I mean, we both can't function without a diary, as you saw today what happened with me. But a very nice tip I've learned, speaking about your desk, is that divide your drawers into, if you have drawers, it's really nice if you have 3 drawers, this works really well, or have 3 piles in. My top drawer is what needs attention today now. The middle drawer is what is important. It needs attention relatively urgently. It's not urgent now, but it may become urgent. The bottom drawer is I can look at that whenever. So I find that time management and having organizing skills like that is also very important.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for those tips. I do find that when I did my book launch, my second book launch, we've got a flip chart, and I actually wrote down all of these things and I ticked them off as I went, so it was visible. It wasn't just in a diary, and it actually did help focus me and center me, because when I'm having anxiety, then I'm like all over the place and I do nothing. Whereas if I can visually see it, it becomes a lot easier. Jean, I just want to ask you to tell us a little bit about your book. You've got a book that's already published, and I think there's another one on the way. Tell us a little bit about that book and how we can get hold of it.
No pressure, eh? You're talking to somebody who's just come back from burnout. All right, yes, I'll get to the second book in a moment. All right, so yes, I recently actually published Magic Mirror Mind. The subtitle currently is Claim Personal Power, Find Wholeness, and Awaken Potential After Abuse and Trauma. What this book specifically is about, it's about, well, evaluating those belief systems we all have, actually prevents us from personal healing. Obviously, I focused this book a lot on abuse and trauma. Why abuse and trauma? Because, as controversial as this may sound, not all abuse is traumatic. Not all trauma is abuse related. And really, it's about transforming the beliefs which hold us back from healing emotionally. And a person who's stuck in trauma or has unprocessed trauma have a lot of relationship difficulties from experience. So when you start healing those emotional wounds, you start healing the relationships, which the book branches over into. And then what happens in abuse and trauma is you have a whole lot of suppression of a person's true potential happening. There was another study actually done on this, quite well known through psychologists also, where if you take a very traumatized person and you let them make a career decision now versus a person who you put through therapy, 5-10 years later, they're going to be making a very different career choice. So trauma changes you. It's really about coming back from all of that. The next book, Magic Mirror Mind 2, Much shorter subtitle. You learn things with your first book. Lesson being shorter subtitle next time. Actually, yeah, magic will remind to think your life well. So what this really is about is initially the plan was to really make it an extension of the first book and how abuse and trauma actually now impact us in the different areas of wellness. Because wellness isn't just health. Wellness is physical health, psychological health, how your relationship's doing, sexuality, um, are you a safe driver? You know, wellness is very, very, very broad. Career links into wellness. Stress management links into wellness, depending at the model of wellness you're looking at. So yes, the plan was to make it an extension of this book. And originally the intention was that I wanted to really focus on abuse and trauma and how it impacts us on those different areas of wellness. For example, a very simple example obviously could be person who's had traumas, the body has been through a lot of stress. A couple of years later, this person develops an immune condition, autoimmune disorder. I'm very about the body-mind connection when it comes to health, wellness, and well-being. That's really kind of my forte, is body-mind-spirit connection. And then I decided I would still keep the focus on that, but I would make the focus a little bit more open. And yes, we will be also going into those areas and looking at all the belief systems, the life experiences, holding us actually back from becoming not just healthy and balanced in those areas, but optimal. So it really is an extension of the first one. I actually recommend that people read the first one. They go into the understanding of the second one, but you don't necessarily have to actually read the first one. Timeline for the second one. I dread to actually mention anything current in public.
You can say quarters, like first quarter, last quarter, first half, second half of the year.
Well, that was a huge stressor for me, in actual fact, which contributed to my burnout, was that I had dates and this whole COVID-19 thing happened with me. And so I've become like very cautious of giving out dates at this point. But I would say look out second half of the year, I would say.
Second
maybe
half
towards
of 2021.
yeah, 2021 already. Yeah, 2021 second half, I would actually say. I'm just going to type my contact details in the box below.
Yeah.
Obviously, I am using the international code. And then I'm actually much better on email, to be honest,
Yes.
than telephonically. And I've now actually employed an assistant to actually take some of the workload off. And I actually think that's also so important, Kim, to end off with, is what work can you give away?
That's true.
Because for me, that has actually been instrumental in bringing balance back into my life. Was actually, I did an exercise which also really helped a lot, where you take a piece of paper, divide it into 4 zones. The first zone is a zone of excellence. This is what you are really great at. Only you can do this. I can only write down my own books. Then the second zone is like, put it like the zone of greatness. You're really good at this. You can do it just as well as other people. Then the next zone, like, you know, the third one at the bottom, before we get to the last one, is like, it's kind of like the zone, I'm okay with doing this. I either don't want to do this or somebody else rather would like to do this. In my case, I do not like admin. I do not like accounting. I've never been a paper person. I even run a paperless practice now. I didn't even want to actually bring out a book on paper. I'm such a paperless person. And I've given a lot of things away in that zone. And then obviously at the bottom zone, which is what you are really bad at. And for me, funny enough, most of my life that's really been mathematics, but not that I could give that away in this exercise. But what you really want to do ideally is you want to, if you have the zone of I'm not good with it, I'm okay with it, I'm great with it, I'm excellent with it, you actually want to give as much as possible away from the zone of greatness. So you actually just focus on zone of excellence. And I was listening to an interview from a blogger this morning, also an author, like us, had no experience, became highly successful. He didn't have the website, the newsletters, that stuff going. And I said, but to somebody, you know, who's not like us independent authors who have to be so tech-savvy, how did you do this? Because the same things. And he said, you know what, he just simply focused on what he was good with. And it was really good for him actually to not know how to do the other things. And that's the thing. How much are you trying to do in an author career? Because as an independent author, you're really not just running a career, you're running another business. You're managing yourself as an author. You're essentially managing yourself as a publisher and yourself as your public relations agent, marketer. You're running yourself as a powerhouse. Yes. You can't do it all. Yeah. I think maybe for men, that's even worse. Realizing that we actually can't shoulder it, even though it's drilled into us. Yes. My culture that you have the broad shoulders. Yes, I'm not saying, you know, be a woman, because the publishing industry is not for women. I think you agree on that. But yeah, you can't do it all.
Yes, that's true. Well, Juan, I want to thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed this.
It's been a great pleasure, and I've learned a lot from you. I know that our channel is very specifically focused at authors, but if there are authors that are watching this, these kinds of conditions that Juan is speaking about actually do affect all kinds of industries. So if you're an author and you're watching this and you enjoy it and you know of someone else who is struggling with these kinds of issues, just pass the video on through to them, share it to them so that they can also get the benefit of his experience. And please remember to subscribe to the video so that you can get notification of new videos. Pop in any comments that you have. If you've suffered from burnout beforehand and you've got some special tips or advice for us, we'd love to hear from you. And any other video ideas that people have, please pass them on to me and I will be sure to find someone that can assist you in that area. Okay, Juan, thank you so much, and you have a fantastic Christmas, you and your family, and a wonderful new year. We hope to hear from your book soon. And at the bottom, I am going to post the links for Juan's book that you can get on Amazon, and you can contact him directly for any other inquiries. I'm only going to put your email address because this is an international platform and we don't want you getting messages on your phone at all kinds of hours.
All right, I'm not too concerned about that. I have somebody managing that. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the time. Also let me, you know, think about some things again. I've scratched out some things I haven't even thought of in years. And then, I don't know, once obviously people see this link and they're watching, if they like, they can obviously even ask questions in the comments. And if you'd like, I'm willing to even answer some questions in the comments. Perfect. If people need some extra help and advice, if that's all right with you guys. And same for you guys. Very Merry Christmas and a wonderful New Year.
Thanks so much. Bye for now.
Thank you.